These drugs survived as hymns. Number 10. Neolithic opium, the Sumerian joy plant. In 5900 BC, farmers in European caves were already cultivating a crop that would become humanity's oldest painkiller and its deadliest addiction, containing alkaloids so variable that identical harvests could heal or kill. The opium poppy is one of the first drugs humanity ever grew on purpose. Archaeological evidence places it in Neolithic farming communities along the western Mediterranean. Spanish caves hold seeds dated to nearly 6,000 years before the Common Era. That is not accidental scattering. That is cultivation. The poppy moved through early human systems as food, as medicine, as trade currency, and as something sacred. Later, the Sumerians may have called it Hul Gil. The translation offered is usually plant of joy. That claim is debated among scholars, but Mesopotamian texts certainly knew opium. The pharmacology lives inside the latex, the milky sap that weeps from a scored poppy capsule. That sap contains morphine. It contains codeine. It contains the bane, papaverine, and noscapine. Morphine is the one that matters most. It stops pain. It induces euphoria. It suppresses breathing. That last effect is what makes opioid overdose lethal. Your lungs simply stop. Codeine is weaker but still active. The bane is different entirely. It is excitatory, dangerous, not used recreationally or medically in its raw form. Here is the problem that runs through every substance in this catalog. The ratio of these alkaloids is never fixed. It shifts with the cultivar, with the maturity of the capsule when you harvest it, with the soil it grew in, with how the sap was processed. One batch of raw opium might deliver gentle, effective pain relief. Another batch, prepared identically as far as the user could tell, might carry enough morphine to stop your heart. Ancient users had no way to measure milligrams. They had no concept of a dose-response curve. What they had was experience, generations of it, passed through oral tradition and careful observation. And sometimes that experience failed. The Neolithic farmers who first scored those capsules were not reckless. They were solving a problem. Pain, injury, sleeplessness, childbirth. Opium answered all of it, but it answered unpredictably. The Sumerians wrapped it in language. Joy, divinity, gift. That was not poetry for its own sake. It was a way of encoding respect, a cultural warning that this plant demanded care. By the 19th century, the gap between the plant and the chemical had widened beyond repair. Friedrich Sertuiner isolated morphine from opium in 1804. That was the turning point. Once morphine could be separated, weighed, and dosed, it could be controlled. Codeine followed. The bane became a pharmaceutical feedstock, but only after chemistry learned to count the molecules. Modern medicine still uses morphine. It uses codeine. It uses semi-synthetic opioids built from the bane. What it does not use is raw opium, because raw opium is a naturally variable opioid system. Not a drug, a system. One that humans managed through ritual, through trade networks, and through the accumulated deaths of those who got the dose wrong. Neolithic opium was the ancient joy that demanded modern measurement. Natural potency became reliable medicine only when chemistry learned to see what the eye could not. The poppy survived. The guesswork did not. Number 9. Datura Jimsonweed, the reality eraser. There is no safe dose. A plant used in sacred Chumash rituals produces hallucinations so complete that users lose the ability to distinguish them from reality, while their body temperature climbs towards seizure. If you want more mysteries like this, hit subscribe. The next entries only get darker. Datura is feared, not respected. Feared. It appears in initiation rites, in divination, in sorcery, in religious practice, and in emergency rooms. The major species include Datura stramonium, known as Jimson weed, also Datura inoxia, also Datura wrightii. In California, researchers found chewed plant quids at a site called Pinwheel Cave. The quids were associated with the Chumash people. Rock art surrounded them. Physical evidence of ritual use. Datura also appears in South Asia, connected to the god Shiva and to ascetic practice. The alkaloids are tropins, atropine, hyoscyamin, scopolamine. They block acetylcholine receptors throughout the brain and body. The result is not a psychedelic experience. It is delirium. That distinction is critical. A psychedelic alters perception. The user generally knows they are under the influence. A delirant replaces reality. Users do not know their hallucinations are hallucinations. Reported experiences include conversations with people who are not there, phantom insects crawling on skin, repetitive impossible actions, trying to smoke a cigarette that does not exist, trying to drink from an empty glass, over and over. And alongside the mental effects comes physical toxicity, dangerously high body temperature, urinary retention, racing heart, seizures. The seeds are especially dangerous. The alkaloid load in them is concentrated and unpredictable. In a modern emergency room, Datura poisoning is managed with sedation and supportive care. You keep the patient stable while the drug passes. The effects can last for days. Ritual specialists in the past may have controlled the context tightly. The setting, the dose, the supervision. Modern users inherit the plant, not the safety culture. There is a phrase that applies here more than anywhere else in this catalog. No therapeutic window. There is no gap between a dose that produces effects and a dose that causes severe toxicity. They sit on top of each other. Datura does not reveal visions. It replaces the world. And the replacement is not gentle. It is not mystical. It is confusion, panic, amnesia, hyperthermia. Medicine uses purified anticholinergic compound in controlled settings. It does not use Datura preparations, because Datura is what happens when a plant becomes an ordeal. The Chumash may have known how to survive it. We do not know what they knew. The quids were found. The instructions were not. Number 8. Henbane, the Viking berserker fuel. Viking graves contain seeds of a nightshade so potent it may have turned warriors into the legendary berserkers. Men who felt no pain, recognized no ally, and remembered nothing afterward. Black henbane grows across Europe and Western Asia. It belongs to the nightshade family, the same family as Datura, the same family as Mandrake. It appears in Viking Age archaeology, in Anglo-Saxon medical texts, in early modern witchcraft records. One of the most discussed finds involves seeds discovered near the Theriac ring fortress in Denmark. A woman's grave. Some interpret it as belonging to a ritual specialist, someone whose role was to handle such substances. That interpretation feeds the berserker hypothesis, the idea that Norse warriors used henbane to enter battle frenzy. The hypothesis is plausible. It is not proven. Henbane's chemistry is tropin alkaloids, hyoscyamin, scopolamine, atropine-like compounds. The effect is anticholinergic delirium, and the key feature of that delirium is loss of insight. A person in it hallucinates without knowing the hallucinations are false. The state includes agitation, confusion, amnesia. Physical signs match the other nightshades. Dry mouth, dilated pupils, racing heart, fever, seizures, in severe cases, coma. Why might henbane fit the berserker descriptions better than fly agaric, the mushroom often proposed? Some analyses argue that Henbane's effects align more closely with historical accounts. Reduced response to pain, disinhibition, rage, distorted perception of threat, a combination that could resemble the berserker state. There is also a serious complication. Henbane's absorption varies depending on the root. Seeds, leaves, smoke, oil, topical preparation applied to skin. Each root delivers the alkaloids differently. The modern study of this is honest about its limits. It blends ethnobotany and archaeology, not settled science. The alkaloid concentration in Henbane depends on the plant part, its growth stage, its environment, the same chemotype variability that haunts every plant in this catalog. Ritual or martial use also left fewer records than medicinal use did. So the evidence base is thin. Witch trial narratives actively distorted plant knowledge, filtering it through fear, coerced confession, persecution. Modern medicine isolates Henbane's alkaloids. It rejects the whole plant, just as it does with Mandrake. But Henbane's absorption is even more erratic. Its behavioral effects more chaotic. The true horror is not simple intoxication. It is reality failure. Henbane shows how a plant can turn courage into chemical delirium. And the berserkers, if they used it, paid a price we can only guess at. No pain, no memory, no control. At number 7, Mandrake, the screaming root that put patients down. Medieval surgeons used a root shaped like a human body to render patients unconscious. But the gap between sleep and death was so narrow that waking up was never guaranteed. Before reliable anesthesia existed, surgery was a race against pain, against shock, against a conscious patient's ability to endure. Ancient and medieval surgeons needed unconsciousness. One of their tools was Mandrake. Physicians across Greek, Roman, Arab, and European traditions described its narcotic power. They were not imagining it. Mandrake genuinely altered consciousness, powerfully enough that surgeons kept reaching for it despite obvious risks. The plant also carries one of the most famous reputations in folklore, largely because of its root, which can grow in a forked, vaguely human shape. That human-shaped root became a bridge into supernatural legend. Stories of a screaming root that kills those who pull it from the ground. Strip away the folklore, and you find the real reason Mandrake mattered. It was placed inside a desperate medical need. Pain control. And it worked well enough to keep being used. The active danger is tropin alkaloids. 3 matter here. Hyoscyamin and atropine block muscarinic acetylcholine receptors, interrupting a major signaling system of the nervous system. Scopolamine does the same, but it penetrates the brain effectively, producing sedation, amnesia, delirium. The full symptom cluster of tropin poisoning is recognizable. And grim, dry mouth, dilated pupils, racing heart, hallucinations, dangerously elevated body temperature. The problem for a surgeon is the spacing of the effects. Only a small change in exposure separates useful sleep from delirium, from coma, from death. They sit very close together on the dose scale. Medieval medicine developed a delivery technology for this. The asterisk sponges somnifera, the sleep sponge. A sponge was soaked in a narcotic preparation, then held to the patient's face, so the compounds could be inhaled. It was a genuine attempt at controlled drug delivery. But practitioners also combined Mandrake with opium, with Henbane, with belladonna, and each combination multiplied the risk. Stacking depressant and deliriant plants together made the outcome even harder to predict. Compare Mandrake to modern anesthesia, which depends entirely on titration, giving a precise, adjustable dose, monitoring the patient continuously. Mandrake offered nothing like that control. because the plant's alkaloid content varied from specimen to specimen, which made recovery unpredictable. As surgery and chemistry improved, whole root practice declined. The folk plant became obsolete once isolated compounds and anesthetic gases became available. Modern medicine still uses mandrake's chemical descendants. Atropine and scopolamine remain in clinical use today, but it rejects the whole root, because no clinician can dose raw mandrake safely. Ancient anesthesia worked by mimicking death, and hopping the patient came back. Mandrake proves that pain relief was discovered before safety was understood. Surgeons knew the plant worked. They did not know the margin. And in the space between sleep and death, countless patients never woke. The root, shaped like a human body, delivered unconsciousness, but it could not promise return. Number 6. Kykeon, the Eleusinian mystery drink. For 2,000 years, Greek philosophers drank a barley mixture before entering the Eleusinian mysteries. And the leading theory today is that it contained a water-soluble relative of LSD extracted from infected grain. At Eleusis, near Athens, initiates into the mysteries drank a beverage called Kykeon. The basic ingredients are known from tradition: barley, water, a flavoring related to pennyroyal, a mint family herb. The rites at Eleusis ran for roughly 2,000 years. The initiates were not marginal figures. Philosophers, politicians, Roman-era intellectuals, members of the educated elite. And the exact recipe was never plainly written down, because secrecy was the entire structure of the cult. Revealing the mysteries was a serious offense, punishable, fatal in some cases. The most discussed modern explanation is the ergot hypothesis. Ergot is *claviceps purpurea, a fungus that infects grain, including barley. Ergot produces alkaloids related to lysergic acid. This is the same chemical family that the chemist Albert Hofmann later worked with when he synthesized LSD. The hypothesis is that an ergot-infected barley drink could have been psychoactive. But you have to separate two things carefully. Ergot contains potentially psychoactive lysogramides, and it also contains violently toxic ergot alkaloids. The toxic fraction causes ergotism, a horrifying condition, convulsions, gangrene from constricted blood flow, miscarriage, mass poisoning outbreaks that recurred through European history as epidemics. Hofmann's specific argument was that the water-soluble lysogramides might have been separated out, accessible through a simple water extraction that left the worst toxins behind. The counterpoint from critics is firm. Chemical possibility is not historical proof. Showing that something could be done is not the same as showing it was done. There is also newer interest in whether ancient processing methods could have reduced the toxic components. But that too remains unproven. Frame Kykeon as ritual pharmacology operating under total secrecy. And notice the terrifying margin involved. Too little of the active material, and there is no revelation. Just barley water. Too much and you have poisoning. The therapeutic window, in modern terms, was extraordinarily narrow. The oath of secrecy preserved the awe of Eleusis for 2 millennia. But it destroyed reproducibility. We cannot reconstruct the recipe. On top of the chemistry, the experience was shaped by fasting, by darkness, by ritual choreography, and by intense expectation, all of which could amplify whatever the drink contained. Modern pharmacology isolates lysogramides in clean, measured form, rather than trusting infected grain. And pennyroyal, that flavoring agent, adds its own danger. Through toxic monoterpene chemistry, pennyroyal oil is a known poison. The foundations of Western philosophy are connected to a cup that modern regulators would refuse outright. Eleusis shows how ritual can make a poison feel like a revelation, and how an oath of silence can erase the boundary between the two. We know initiates drank, we know they experienced something powerful enough to shape their lives. We do not know what was in the cup. Number 5. Soma, the Vedic immortality drink with no identity. The Rigveda praises it in over 100 hymns as the drink of gods and immortality. But modern scholars cannot agree whether it was a stimulant, a mushroom, or a combination that no longer exists. Open the Rigveda, the ancient collection of Sanskrit hymns, and you find Soma. It is a plant. It is a drink. It is a god. It is a power. It was pressed, filtered, praised, consumed, and offered to deities. Soma is woven through some of the oldest religious poetry in the world. And yet we cannot say for certain what it was. In the text, Soma connects to strength, to vision, to divine access, and to the language of immortality. That word immortality almost certainly does not mean literal endless life. It points to divine vitality, a heightened state of power and presence. Soma was both a pharmacological substance and a theological event, and the hymns do not separate those roles. The scholarly debate over Soma's botanical identity is long, unresolved, and it splits into several candidates. The first is ephedra asterisk, a stimulant plant. This candidate draws strength from the parallel with Halma, the closely related sacred substance of the ancient Iranian tradition. The Indo-Iranian connection is linguistic and ritual. Ephedra contains ephedrine-like compounds that produce wakefulness, endurance, alertness, and an increased load on the cardiovascular system. The second candidate is Amanita muscaria, the fly agaric mushroom, famously proposed by the scholar R. Gordon Wasson. Wasson's theory runs through visionary intoxication and parallels with Siberian shamanic mushroom use. The third candidate is Peganum harmala, Syrian rue, which contains beta-carboline compounds. Its alkaloids, harmine and harmaline, act on monoamine systems in the brain and can produce altered perception. There are also mixture theories, which propose that Soma combined a stimulant, a visionary agent, and ritual factors, rather than being a single plant. Modern scholarship treats this as a three-way problem: botanical, linguistic, ritual. Critics of each theory point out that no single candidate explains everything the texts describe. So why was the knowledge lost in the first place? Migration moved the people who used Soma into new environments, where the original plant may not have grown. Substitution followed, with ritually acceptable replacement plants standing in for the original. Over time, ritual transformation separated the name from the species. The word Soma survived. The plant behind it did not. And crucially, no recovered vessel, no archaeological residue has definitively solved the chemical identity. Pharmacology cannot regulate a drug whose source organism is unknown. There is no honest way to claim a single final identity for Soma. The uncertainty is the actual story here. Soma is a recipe that was absorbed into a religion. The strongest drug in the Vedic world may have survived only as a hymn. Over 100 hymns, describing strength, ecstasy, divine communion. And nowhere in any of them does it say what the plant actually was. That silence has lasted 3,000 years. Number 4. Theriac, the 64-ingredient poison antidote. Venetian pharmacists mixed opium, viper flesh, and dozens of exotic ingredients into a paste believed to cure all poisons, and held public ceremonies to prove it was real, centuries before any regulator could test a single claim. Picture an ancient royal court. Poison is a constant political tool, and the fear of it is constant too. Out of that fear grew one of the most ambitious pharmaceutical projects of the ancient world. Theriac. Theriac began as an answer to the question, how do you make yourself immune to being poisoned? The mythic ancestor of the whole tradition is Mithridates VI, the king of Pontus, who, according to legend, dosed himself with small amounts of poisons and antidotes to build resistance. From that legend, antidote culture grew. In Galenic Rome, the physician Galen and his contemporaries turned Theriac into a formal medical compound, with documented recipes. Then medieval Venice did something distinctly modern. It turned Theriac into a luxury pharmaceutical brand. Venetian Theriac was a premium export. Its production even included public compounding ceremonies, where the ingredients were displayed and mixed in the open. That was early quality control theater, a way of assuring buyers that the expensive product was genuine, centuries before any regulatory inspector existed. What was actually in it? Theriac was an electuary, a medicine usually bound together with honey into a thick paste. The famous recipe contained roughly 60 to 70 ingredients. The list included opium, viper flesh, honey, wine, cinnamon, various resins, myrrh, balsams, and castoreum, a secretion from beavers. Of these, opium did real pharmacological work. It is a genuine analgesic, sedative, cough suppressant, euphoriant. The viper flesh was largely antidotal symbolism. The logic that a controlled dose of the poisonous creature would answer poison itself. The aromatics, the cinnamon and myrrh and resins, served as digestive aids, warming agents, antimicrobials, or simply symbolic components. Some ingredients were frankly disturbing, like mumia, material derived from mummified human remains, which functioned as part medicine and part object of authority. Modern analysis frames Theriac as combinatorial pharmacology, arriving long before the laboratory age. And here lies its fundamental problem. With 60+ ingredients, you cannot isolate which component does what. Any apparent benefit cannot be separated from opium, from ritual, from placebo, from the alcohol in the wine, and from the sheer prestige of the product. Reproducibility was impossible too. Ingredient names changed across languages, across merchants, across regions. Adulteration and substitution were rampant. No two batches separated by centuries and geography could be confirmed identical. A modern regulator would demand identity, purity, interaction data, and controlled trials. Theriac offers none of those. Unknown contaminants plus dozens of simultaneously active substances would collapse any approval pathway before it started. Theriac was not one drug. It was an entire pharmacological ecosystem in a jar. Antiquity believed complexity was strength. Modern medicine sees that same complexity as risk. Venice held public ceremonies to prove authenticity. But authenticity of what? A recipe that changed every time it was made. Theriac survived for nearly 2,000 years. Not because it worked predictably, but because it worked symbolically. It was medicine as theater, pharmacy as power, and the 64 ingredients were not a formula. They were a performance. Number 3. Egyptian blue lotus, the flower painted in tombs. Ancient Egyptians infused it into wine at banquets and painted it on tomb walls, and its alkaloids are dopamine agonists now used to treat Parkinson's disease, extracted from a flower whose ritual dose was never written down. Walk through the visual record of ancient Egypt, and you keep encountering one flower. Nile banquet scenes show it pass between guests. Tomb paintings place it in the hands of the dead. It appears again and again in the imagery of the Egyptian elite. First, a correction that matters. The Egyptian blue lotus was not a lotus at all. It was a water lily, Nymphea caerulea. The name is a long-standing misnomer. To the Egyptians, this flower connected to rebirth, to solar renewal, to erotic vitality, to perfume, and to ritual pleasure. It saturated symbolism. It was simultaneously a sacred icon and apparently a psychoactive tool. And those two roles were not in tension for the people using it. A single flower could be both. The chemistry centers on a family of compounds called apomorphine alkaloids. Two are worth naming. The first is apomorphine, which is a dopamine agonist, a compound that activates dopamine receptors. Apomorphine is not an obscure curiosity. It is used in modern medicine to treat Parkinson's disease. The second is nuciferine, which appears to modulate dopamine activity and produces sedative-like, pharmacologically ambiguous effects. Put those together, and you get a contradiction built into the plant. Reports and analyses describe stimulation, sedation, euphoria, nausea, and perceptual alteration, depending on preparation and individual. The receptor activity does not point in one clean direction. The Egyptians appear to have infused blue lotus into wine. In modern terms, this was likely an extraction step. Alcohol can pull alkaloids out of plant material and may enhance their absorption. It also adds its own pharmacology. Alcohol compounds disinhibition and sedation. So a cup of lotus-infused wine was a layered preparation, not a single drug. Modern analysis here leans heavily on case reports. There are documented instances of altered mental status linked to commercial Blue Lotus products. Vaping extracts has become a modern exposure route, and it tends to increase the speed and unpredictability of effects. There is also a practical detection problem. Routine toxicology screens may simply not flag Blue Lotus compounds, so the substance can be present and invisible to standard testing. How did the knowledge degrade? The ritual context survived beautifully, preserved in art for thousands of years. The dosing context did not. The paintings show you that Blue Lotus mattered. They do not tell you how much to use or how to prepare it safely. There is also a modern marketplace problem. Products sold as Blue Lotus may not be authentic *Nymphaea caerulea at all. Identity itself is uncertain before you even reach the question of dose. Medicine can formulate apomorphine as a precise pharmaceutical. It cannot formulate temple wine. The obstacles are identity, purity, and an unstable dose-response relationship, rather than sheer lethality. Blue Lotus is a sacred flower that refuses a simple label. Egyptian ritual turned beauty into chemistry, and the chemistry refuses the myth simplicity. The tomb paintings remain. The wine recipe does not. And somewhere between the two lies a dose we can no longer measure. Number 2. Sonoran desert toad venom, the psychedelic poison *. A toad's defensive secretion contains one of the most powerful psychedelics on Earth, but it also contains compounds that can stop the human heart, which is why researchers now synthesize the drug in labs instead. The Sonoran desert toad is an animal whose glands became mythologized. Its formal name is *Encilius alvarius, also known as the Colorado River toad, and it produces a secretion that modern enthusiasts treat as a sacred psychedelic. Before anything else, you need to understand what that secretion actually is. It is a defensive toxin cocktail. The toad did not evolve it to alter human consciousness. It evolved it to make predators sick or dead. There are claims of pre-Columbian use, that ancient peoples of the region recognized and used the toad. Those claims should be handled carefully. They have been proposed and debated, and they are not fully settled. Toad imagery and toad remains do appear in some archaeological contexts, and that attracts shamanic interpretations. But the gap between an ancient image of a toad and confirmed ritual use of toad venom is wide. Much of what surrounds this animal today is modern ceremonial marketing and revived mythology, not a documented, unbroken tradition. The technical picture is where it gets serious. The gland secretion is bufotenin, a broad mixture, not a clean psychedelic extract. The compound of modern interest inside it is 5-MeO-DMT, a tryptamine. 5-MeO-DMT acts mainly through serotonin receptor systems in the brain Its profile is rapid onset, short duration, and an intense compression of psychological experience. Users report ego dissolution, panic, amnesia, loss of motor control, and mystical type states, often within a single brief and overwhelming episode. The active amounts involved are very small, but 5-MeO-DMT is not alone in that secretion. The venom also contains bufetnine, a related compound, and a class of substances called bufadienolides, which are cardiotoxic. This is the reason the old image of licking a toad is genuinely dangerous. Oral exposure to the raw secretion can deliver cardiac glycoside toxicity, compounds that disrupt the heart, alongside the psychoactive tryptamine. The poison and the psychedelic come packaged together. This is exactly why clinical researchers working with 5-MeO-DMT prefer the synthetic version. Synthetic 5-MeO-DMT is the same target molecule produced in a lab. It avoids harming the animal. It avoids the variability of a biological secretion, which changes from toad to toad. And it avoids the unknown contaminant load. Number 1. Pituri, the Aboriginal super stimulant that traveled a continent. Aboriginal Australians traded a chewing preparation across thousands of miles of desert, and its nicotine to nornicotine ratio shifted so wildly between regions that the same plant could energize or poison depending on where it grew. Deep in the arid interior of Australia, long before any laboratory existed, desert societies were trading a drug across enormous distances. They called it Pituri. It worked as a stimulant. It worked as a medicine. It carried prestige. And it functioned as a hard trade commodity, moving hand to hand through exchange networks that spanned the continent's dry heart. To understand Pituri, you first have to abandon the idea that it was a single substance. It was not. Pituri was a regional name. Different groups applied it to several different chewing preparations, and those preparations did not share one fixed chemistry. That alone tells you something about how ancient drug knowledge actually worked. It was local, specific, and tied to landscape. At the center of the strongest and most famous trade form sits a plant called *Duboisia hopwoodea, a shrub of the inland deserts. Its leaves, processed correctly, produced the high-status pituri that traveled the longest distances and commanded the most value. But Duboisia hopwoodea was not the only plant in the story. Aboriginal groups also chewed several wild species of nicotiana, native tobacco relatives. This is why historical descriptions so often conflict with one another. A 19th century observer might record one plant in one region, and a completely different plant under the same name a few hundred kilometers away. The label stayed constant. The botany did not. Now think about the logistics. Central Australian exchange routes carried pituri bundles across deserts, sometimes packed in bags made of human hair or animal skin. The drug moved through a relay of societies, each handling it, valuing it, and passing it onward. In modern terms, this was a supply chain, complete with quality grading, regional brands, and premium product lines. The premium line had a name and an origin point. The Mulligan River material was historically prized because that population of *Duboisia hopwoodea carried unusually strong nicotine activity. It was, in effect, the high-potency stock. Here is the technical core. The active stimulant in pituri is a pair of closely related alkaloids, nicotine and nornicotine. The ratio between those two compounds varied enormously from plant population to plant population. That variation is the whole problem, and we will stay with it. Chewers also added wood ash to the preparation. The ash was not decoration. It raised the alkalinity of the quid, and higher alkalinity increased how much alkaloid the soft tissues of the mouth could absorb. In pharmacological language, the ash shifted the drug into a more absorbable chemical form, pushing it across the mucous membranes faster and more completely. Chewing also changed the pharmacokinetics compared with smoking. Smoke delivers nicotine in a sharp, fast spike through the lungs. A chewed quid buffered with ash and held against the cheek delivers a slower, more sustained dose, directly through the mouth. Different route, different curve, different experience. But other populations leaned heavily toward nornicotine. And a nornicotine-dominant preparation could be considerably more toxic. Same plant species, same name, wildly different safety profile, depending on where it grew. Modern analysis frames all of this not as one standardized drug, but as a set of plant chemotypes. The chemistry of *Du Bois, Hopwood shifts with region, soil, rainfall, and the specific genetics of each plant population. So how did this knowledge get lost? Partly through the act of recording it. Colonial observers flattened several distinct Aboriginal pharmacopoeias into one convenient word. They wrote down a label and missed the system. Oral tradition, by contrast, preserved the usage context. Which plant, which region, which preparation, far better than the written pharmacological categories ever did. Compare Pituri to a modern nicotine pouch or patch, and the contrast is immediate. The modern product has a fixed measured dose. Pituri's chemistry was never predictable in that way. A regulator today would isolate the nicotine-like compounds and standardize them, rather than approve the raw mixture, because the danger was not simply strength. It was variable alkaloid ecology. Pituri was a plant technology built from landscape knowledge. Soil, ash, trade, and alkaloids assembled into a working drug before any laboratory existed. The bundles moved across the desert for thousands of years. The knowledge of which population produced which ratio moved with them, embedded in the trade itself. Not written, not measured, but known. And when the trade networks collapsed, that knowledge collapsed with them. We know the plant. We know the alkaloids. We know the ash-raised alkalinity. We do not know which specific stand of *Du Bois Hopwood, along which watercourse produced the preparation safe enough to chew all day, and which one produced the preparation that stopped your heart after an hour. That knowledge walked the desert, and it did not survive writing down. Pituri shows the final truth of every substance in this catalog. Ancient drugs were not too strong for modern pharmacology because they were more powerful. They were too strong because their power moved across soil, across seasons, across the invisible chemistry of place. Modern medicine cannot approve a drug whose dose depends on where the rain fell. The desert remembers. The formula does not.